Now, Ukraine has vowed to triumph over the Russian war machine, as the war has now entered into the third year. But Ukraine at this point of time has been weakened due to a lack of Western aid, and Moscow has been emboldened with fresh gains. Now, over the last 2 years, the West has in fact slapped sanctions on Russia's financial and military institutions. But the question is, are these sanctions that have been used as a strategy, as an instrument of war by the West, are they working at all? Our next poll gets you more details.
The second year of Ukraine's fight against Russia's full-scale invasion brought no respite for Ukrainian soldiers or civilians. Along the front line, there are long faces hunkered in the trenches. Ukrainian troops are growing weary.
We have a big problem with manpower. We simply lack men. People have lost their enthusiasm which they had at the beginning of the full-scale invasion. We need big reinforcements. Many people here are tired.
We don't have any ammunition. We didn't have any and we don't have any. In the future, if we don't have them, they will be preparing for war in the West.
Far from the front lines, Western leaders descended on Kyiv to mark the second anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky vows that Ukraine will defeat Russia.
The word Ukraine will always go with the word independent. We are fighting for it for already 730 days of our lives, and we will win on the best day of our life. I thank all of you fighters. I thank our people.
The foreign leaders attended a ceremony in Hostomel, the scene of the first major battle in the conflict, where they expressed solidarity with the country as Ukrainian forces run low on ammunition and weaponry, and Western aid hangs in the balance.
We will continue to guarantee our support for Ukraine, and today we will also sign our security guarantees, as we believe that in Ukraine we are also fighting for our freedom and our national interest. It is in our national interest.
The West has slapped Russian individuals and entities with over 18,700 sanctions. Russian banks and imports have been severely hit. But have the sanctions worked? When the West slammed its door on Putin, he ventured east. Russia has been steadily building closer economic ties with China and other Asian countries. These new partnerships are helping to mitigate the impact of Western sanctions. As the war in Ukraine enters its third year, the conflict will be determined not just on the battlefield, but also in Western capitals and other places far from the front lines. Putin has been turned into a pariah and Russia pushed into far greater isolation by the West. But perhaps it's time to find ways and means to open channels of dialogue to end the long grinding war. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Let's also now cut across to a joint press briefing being held by the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Let's listen in to what's being said.
Ukraine in 2024. The new military support builds on what we've provided since 2022 and continue to provide, and it includes significant support for the armoured coalition, which is an area of Canadian strength and will allow us to continue to demonstrate leadership amongst our coalition partners, and support to the Air Force coalition, building on our commitment in July. There will also be ongoing support over several years because we are here for the long term to help Ukraine win a decisive victory against Putin's unprovoked illegal invasion. But war isn't just experienced on the battlefield. It's lived every day by everyday people. And the government of Ukraine needs to be able to be there for them no matter what, to make sure there is a Ukraine to rebuild once war ends. That's why there is a need for critical financial support, support that will sustain Ukraine's economy and long-term financial stability. This is a significant part of what we are announcing today. This money allows roads to be repaired after a bombing. It pays nurses and doctors who keep people healthy, and it supports Ukrainians as they fight back against Russia. Aujourd'hui, on annonce une contribution de 3,02 milliards de dollars pour apporter une aide financière et militaire essentielle à l'Ukraine en 2024. Cette contribution fait partie d'une entente historique qu'on a conclue avec l'Ukraine et qui prévoit des engagements
Canadian Prime Minister, he, along with a number of other Western leaders, of course, made a beeline to Ukraine today to try and express their solidarity and to again reiterate the Western support for the Ukrainian nation in this extremely difficult hour where it is fighting a war with Russia. And also to give us more insights in terms of what, of course, is happening at this moment and how things stand, because it's 2 years since this Russian invasion of Ukraine began. We're being joined by journalist and political commentator Fred Weir, who is joining us live from Moscow. Now, Mr. Weir, today marks the second-year anniversary since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and what we've witnessed is very interesting. You know, a number of Western leaders have, of course, come to Ukraine to express their solidarity and support. But a lot of critics are saying that this Western support is increasingly beginning to resemble more like lip service of Western support for Ukraine in its fight against Russia. How do you view this?
Well, it's certainly, by the numbers, the actual material support being provided to Ukraine is falling off drastically. And in the United States, the political deadlock has caused it to dry up, at least temporarily. I myself find this astounding that the United West pouring all of its resources into Ukraine, I mean, well, not all, but like humongous amounts of money and materiel, have not managed to create, even to stop the Russians in this war. And in fact, the Russians are doubling down. The Russian economy has not only survived, but it's ramped up to a war footing. I think that you could say the old Soviet military-industrial complex is being revived, not on the basis of Soviet methods, you know, central planning and economic command, but what in the West they call military Keynesianism, private orders, profitable state orders to private industry, which is working as it worked for decades in the United States. You know, it's an extraordinary thing, but Russia seems able to match the United West in terms of providing for its forces in the field, and this is really, I mean, I'm as surprised as anyone at this, even though it's only the 2-year mark in this war.
Mr. Weir, you know, one of the other aspects and what is interesting is that right from the beginning of this war, the West has tried to use sanctions in order to cripple the Russian economy. Do you think the sanctions have worked at all against Russia? And if not, why not?
Well, one thing I thought from the very beginning is that it's going to be impossible to sanction to its knees a country that's self-sufficient in agriculture and energy, as Russia is. But more than that, you know, Russia never fully reintegrated with the world economy after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And somehow that has worked to its benefit, not being directly connected in all the intimate ways that most, like European countries, North American countries are. Russia always had, you know, some physical isolation, and more than that, the experience of being isolated. You know, right. Soviet Union was for many, many decades. I'm not advocating this self-sufficiency. Autarky doesn't work in the long run, but in the short run, they can accomplish a lot. And this is, I think, what the West completely underestimated about Russia from the get-go when they started leveling all these sanctions. They simply didn't reckon with history or the depth of the Russian economy.
I think that's very interesting. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Weir, for joining us and getting us that perspective from Moscow.
Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.